All right, so I'm going to be talking about the synoptic problem. So let me welcome you back to this page, and I hope you are prepared for exams. Those that are writing GPEB exam for August 2024, I hope you are preparing for your exam. So there's something I will be doing from next week. I'm going to be answering objective questions. So I realized that the objective questions can be so wide. It's actually beyond the syllabus. So I've decided I'm going to treat each objective question, explaining how they arrived to the answer. So what I need to do is tell other people that you know that you're writing this exam together, let them subscribe to the page, and the important thing is switch on the notification button, that bell, switch it on so that you will know when I drop questions. You know that one video will not be enough to solve all the questions, right? So make sure you on your notification button and please subscribe to the page. And if you found any content useful, put a thumbs up. If you have a question, drop it for me. I would answer all your questions. My joy is for every one of you to pass and for you to understand everything I'll be teaching. All right, so let's quickly go through the synoptic problem. So the synoptic problem is a topic that most students, they are scared of, they dread, and it's actually very simple. It's very easy. So I'm just going to be explaining it like I'm explaining it to a child in nursery 1, so you understand. So synoptics refers to the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke in the New Testament of the Bible. So we have 3 Gospels, right? Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and they are called the Synoptic Gospels because they share a similar point of view and often recount the same stories about the life and teachings of Jesus. So these 3 books share similar point of view and they recount same stories about the life and teachings of Jesus, frequently with similar wordings and sequence. So sometimes you even realize that their wordings are actually similar, and the sequence, the arrangement of the stories of Jesus are actually similar to the 3 of them. So the term synoptic, why did they give them synoptic? Why did they call them synoptic? The term synoptic comes from the Greek word sign, which means together, and opsis means view. So it means seeing together or viewing together. So you were talking about this gospel, they see together, right? They see together. The 3 Gospels, they give us similar point of view about the life of Jesus. So now here are some key points about the Synoptic Gospels. Okay, so number 1, they have similar content. So the Synoptic Gospels include many of the same events. We have parables, we have teachings of Jesus. So they share same events. When you're talking about the healing of so person, they share same event, they share the same parables, and they cover the birth of Jesus, the ministry of Jesus, the miracles, the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. So if they tell you to talk about what are the features of the Synoptic Gospels, you can say that they share similar content. Then another thing is that differences from John. So you realize that John was not added to it. The Gospel of John is not considered synoptic because it has a different structure, the style and content. Let me give you an example. If you see John chapter 1, it started with what? In the beginning was the word, right? But others didn't start like that. Do you understand? So the structure and style, Matthew used a narrative style, trying to narrate to you how Jesus was giving birth to the generation and all of that. But John used a different style, a different structure, a different content. Right? So it includes unique stories and theological reflections not found in the Synoptic Gospels. John actually talked more of the theological part of the life of Jesus. Realize that John started from, I think, Cana, the wedding at Cana of Galilee. I've forgotten. Please pardon me. All right. So John's style was quite very, very different. Then another thing to mention about the Synoptic Gospel is that the source hypothesis. So when they say source hypothesis, what it means is that the source of a thing. Let's say now I wrote a book. The source cannot be 100% from me. It's possible that I got some information from other people's book that I read. So that's what they call source. right? So we have source hypothesis. Scholars believe that Matthew and Luke may have used Mark as a source. What they're saying is, so when they say something is an hypothesis, you know, an hypothesis will become theory, right? So hypothesis means something that you are not certain, right? But you are just assuming because of some certain evidences that you have. Do you understand? Let me give you a very funny analogy. So let's say that, talking about hypothesis, now let's assume that everyone in the room ate, maybe someone farted, right? Someone polluted the air, and you just decided that, oh, it's also a person that farted just because that person ate beans. You are not sure. The only way you can be sure is probably you decide to smell the person's butt and realize that, oh, the smell is coming from here. So that's what they call hypothesis, something you are not sure. But because you have a little evidence, until you prove it that, oh, this thing is right, then it becomes a theory. So let's continue. So source hypothesis say that scholars believe that Matthew and Luke may have used Mark. So what they're saying is that Matthew and Luke use Mark, that is, all the stories in Matthew and Luke, they got them from Mark. And also, Matthew and Luke use an hypothetical source called Q source. So it's just like, say, calling a textbook Q. So that Q is from the German word Quelle, meaning source. So this theory helps explain the similarities and differences among the three Gospels. Alright, so let's move on quickly. So in summary, this whole introduction, synopsis refers to the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, which are similar in content and perspective, providing a cohesive view of the life and teachings of Jesus. So let's quickly go to the main thing of this video, the synoptic problem. Why did they call it a problem? How is it a problem? So the synoptic problem refers to the scholarly question of how to account for the similarities and differences in content, order, and wording among the synoptic gospels. This is what they are saying. So they realize that, okay, if you are saying that Matthew, Mark, and Luke share similar events, there are some differences that they saw, right? There are some things that Matthew wrote that Luke did not write. If you are saying that Matthew and Luke used the book of Mark, right? Why is it that there are some things that Mark did not include and we found them in Matthew and Luke? There are some things that only Luke wrote about that Matthew did not write about. So it's a problem. So they needed to find a solution to that problem. That's why they called it the synoptic problem. So I've seen one of your questions that they asked that they should explain the synoptic problem and the theories, right? So the synoptic problem refers to the scholarly question of how to account for the similarities and differences in content, order, and wording among the synoptic gospels. If you need the note, you can pause the video and write it out. So now this problem arises because these three gospels often tell the same stories about Jesus' life and ministry, sometimes in almost identical language, yet they also have significant differences. Now, here are some key points about the synoptic problem. Literary relationship. So let's talk about common material. Matthew, Mark, and Luke share a substantial amount of material, sometimes with exact wording and sequence. Just the same thing I've explained, that they share similar story, like talking about some of the miracles that Jesus performed. Realize that we have it in the three of them. Then each gospel also contains unique material not found in the others. So let me give you an example. Matthew talk about how Jesus came from David, right, up to the first creation story. Luke did not mention anything like that. Now, Luke gave us a thorough breakdown of Jesus' birth, how Jesus was related to Elizabeth and all of that. Matthew didn't give us a thorough breakdown like that. So those are materials that are unique to them. Do you understand? So that's what unique material means. So they have common material, they also have unique material. Then order of writing. Scholars debate the order in which the Synoptic Gospels were written. The most widely accepted theory is that Mark was written first. So they can ask you, in your exam, that you should explain what Markan Priority means. It means that a theory that states that Mark was written first and Matthew and Luke used Mark as a source. So they are saying that Matthew and Luke just buttressed what Mark has written. They copied the book of Mark. Then we have source hypothesis. We have two source hypotheses. Now, talking about two source, but now we are talking about how were they able to solve this problem, we have the two source hypothesis. So the first way they were able to solve it was what? The Markan theory, right? That, oh, Mark was written first, Matthew and Luke used the book of Mark. That's why we have similar content. Now we have the two source hypothesis, which explains why we have content that are not in Mark, but we found them in Matthew and Luke. So the two source hypothesis says that this theory suggests that Matthew and Luke were based on two main sources, the Gospel of Mark and the hypothetical sayings collection called Kel, which I've explained earlier. Then we also have the Farrer hypothesis. This proposes that Mark was written for. Sorry, I'm talking very fast. I don't want this video to be longer than 15 minutes. This proposes that Mark was written first, followed by Matthew, which used Mark as a source, and then Luke, which used both Mark and Matthew. Do you get? Let me explain that. So this hypothesis, called Farrer hypothesis, state that Mark was written first, followed by Matthew. So Matthew copied Mark. Matthew used Mark as a source, and then Luke used both Mark and Matthew. That's why the book of Luke is quite wider than both of them. Do you understand? Then moving on, we have minor agreements. Sometimes Matthew and Luke agree against Mark in small details, which complicate the question of their sources and interdependence. Then we have redaction criticism. This approach examines how each gospel writer edited or redacted their sources to suit their own theological purposes and audience. Now, in summary, the synoptic problem is the challenge of explaining the literary relationship among the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, particularly how they can be so similar. How they can be so similar. So sorry, pardon me. How they can be so similar in some places, yet different in others. Various hypotheses, such as the two-source hypothesis and the Farrer hypothesis, have been proposed to solve this problem. So I also try to explain more about the two-source hypothesis here. All right. So talking about two-source hypothesis, so I mentioned that just to explain better. The two-source hypothesis is a widely accepted solution to the synoptic problem, suggesting that the Gospels of Matthew and Luke were based on two main sources, right? The Gospel of Mark and the Kel source. Okay, so this is a diagram explaining it. So this diagram says that Matthew and Luke use Kel source. They also use what? The Mark source, right? And then the Gospel of Mark is believed to be the earliest of the Synoptic Gospels and was used as a source by both Matthew and Luke, then the Kel source. So Matthew and Luke, both Gospels are believed to have drawn from Mark and Kel, which each also including unique material not found in the other Gospels. So this hypothesis helps explain the similarities and differences in the content, order, and wording of the Synoptic Gospels. Now let me mention something. There's also another hypothesis, I think it's called the first source hypothesis, which says that we have the Q source, the book of Mark as a source, then we have the M source, which stands for Matthew. This means that any story that is peculiar to only the book of Matthew, the author of the book of Matthew, used another source called M source. Then we also have the L source, which is an hypothetical name, that any story that will be found in Luke that we cannot find in other books, other synoptics, that means the author of the book of Luke used another source called the L source. So this explains the synoptic problem. Please, if you are not clear with this explanation, kindly comment below. All right. I think that will be all for this video. I hope you found this very useful. All right. Thank you for watching. Bye. Don't forget to subscribe. All right.